April 16th, 2011. 2:47 p.m. Norman's Rare Guitars on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood, the kind of shop where rock legends come to spend six figures on vintage instruments. That afternoon, 58-year-old Norman Harris sat behind his desk, polishing a 1959 Gibson Les Paul worth more than most people's houses. Then the door chime rang, and the small man in the purple hoodie who walked in was about to teach Norman the most expensive lesson of his 35-year career. But Norman didn't know that yet. In fact, he thought quite the opposite. The man who entered had a disheveled afro poking out from under his hood, sunglasses covering half his face, and worn-out jeans that looked like they'd seen better days. Norman interpreted this as casual browser, maybe $2,000 budget, probably just here to look. Norman Harris was no ordinary guitar dealer. When he opened this shop in 1976, vintage guitars weren't even considered serious investments yet. But Norman had seen the Future, Clapton's Blackie, Stevie Ray's No. 1, B.B. King's Lucille. He'd handled them all over the years, watching their values multiply. Now his shop was like a silent museum. Walls covered with vintage Fenders and Gibsons, display cases filled with rare amplifiers and effects pedals. His customers were no longer ordinary musicians, but millionaire collectors and museum curators. Norman was careful to maintain this status. Prince, though Norman didn't know it yet, hadn't actually planned to stop at the shop that day. He'd been at Sunset Sound Studios 3 blocks away, finishing a session. Walking to his car, he saw the vintage Stratocaster in Norman's window display. Something about it pulled him in. Prince was 53 years old. He'd been playing professionally for 35 years, and he had a peculiar relationship with guitars, not as collectibles, but as languages. Each one spoke differently. He pushed open the door. The chime rang. Norman looked up from his desk, gave the visitor a quick once-over. Not our typical clientele, Norman thought. As Prince walked through the door, he hoped not to be recognized. Sometimes people didn't recognize him, especially with the hood and sunglasses. He liked that. Being famous was exhausting. Sometimes he just wanted to look at guitars like a normal person. Norman watched the stranger move toward the display shelves. The man was moving slowly, deliberately, hands in pockets, studying each guitar carefully. This irritated Norman slightly. Tire kickers, he thought. They come in, touch everything, ask a million questions, then leave without buying anything. Norman stood up and walked toward the stranger. "Can I help you find something?" he called out, his voice carrying more impatience than hospitality. The man turned and spoke quietly, almost shyly. "Yeah, just looking at the Strats." Norman raised his eyebrows. The man's voice was soft, but there was something about the way he said Strats. Like he knew, them, really knew them. Norman walked to the glass case at the back of the shop. Inside sat his crown jewel, a 1964 Fender Stratocaster, 3-tone sunburst, all original parts, mint condition. "This is what you want to see," Norman said, unlocking the case. He carefully removed the Stratocaster and placed it on the counter. 1964 Pre-C-BS Strat. One owner, studio musician from Detroit. Never toured with it. Kept in a climate-controlled case for 40 years. He paused for effect. $45,000. The man nodded slowly. Didn't flinch, didn't gasp, just nodded. Norman, reading the silence as hesitation. "Look, I understand that's a serious number, but this is investment grade. In 5 years, this will be worth $60,000, maybe more. These pre-CBS models are only appreciating." The man leaned forward slightly, studying the guitar without touching it. "Can I see it?" Norman's expression changed, something between surprise and suspicion. "This is a very valuable instrument," he said, carefully. "I typically require proof of funds before allowing customers to handle pieces in this price range." Translation: "I don't think you can afford this." The man straightened up, looked at Norman directly for the first time. "I understand." Then he turned away from the glass case entirely. Norman exhaled, relieved. Good. Didn't waste too much time on a looker. But then the stranger did something unexpected. He walked toward the budget section. The left wall. The guitars. Norman barely glanced at any more. Norman watched, confused, as the man moved to the cheapest part of the shop. This was where Norman kept trade-ins he'd accepted just to close other deals. Guitars with cosmetic damage, instruments he planned to sell in bulk to pawn shops eventually. The man stopped in front of a dusty shelf in the far corner. On the bottom shelf, partially hidden behind a cardboard box, a beat-up Fender Telecaster. The guitar looked terrible. Faded finish, scratches everywhere, rusty strings, a price tag scrawled on masking tape, $300. The man crouched down and picked it up. Norman, from across the shop. "Sir, that's just a trade-in. Came in last month. Honestly, it needs so much work it's probably not worth the effort. If you're looking for something playable, I'd recommend—" But the man wasn't listening. He was studying the guitar, turning it over, examining the back of the headstock, running his fingers along the neck, checking the bridge. Norman walked over, slightly annoyed now. "That guitar needs new strings, a full setup, probably a fret job. I've got it marked at $300, but honestly, I'd let it go for $200. Save you the hassle." The man stood up. Still holding the guitar, he looked at Norman and said very quietly, "How much do you think this is worth?" Norman glanced at the price tag. "Like I said, $200, maybe $250 if I'm being generous." The man removed his sunglasses for the first time. "It's worth $50,000. Silence. Norman laughed, nervous. "I'm sorry, what?" "This guitar. It's worth $50,000. Norman's smile faded. "Sir, I don't know what you're trying to—" "Look at the back of the headstock." Norman took the guitar, turned it over. Under years of dust and grime, barely visible, a small serial number stamping, but not a factory stamp. A hand-stamped custom number. Norman squinted. The number format was unusual, not standard Fender. This was a pre-production prototype number. "This is a 1950 Telecaster. Prototype," the man said calmly. "One of maybe 12 ever made, before Fender officially released the Telecaster to the public." Norman's hands started shaking. How do you know that?" The man pointed to the neck pocket. "See these tool marks? That's Leo Fender's signature milling pattern. He hand-shaped the early prototypes himself. And this wear pattern on the neck," he ran his thumb along a specific spot. "That's 60 years of playing. You can't fake that. The wood oxidation, the finger grooves, the fret wear. This guitar was used. Hard." Norman couldn't breathe. "Where did this come from?" the man asked. Norman, stammering. "Trade-in. Some kid. Last month. Said his grandfather died. Found it in the garage. Wanted cash fast for the funeral." "The grandfather? What did he do?" I don't know. I didn't ask." The man nodded slowly. "Probably a session musician. 1950s Los Angeles. Fender used to give prototypes to local players for testing. Most of them are lost. This is one of maybe 3 known to still exist." Norman sat down heavily on a stool. "I was going to sell this to a pawn shop. Next week. Bulk lot." The man set the guitar carefully on the counter. "Why were you going to sell it?" "Because it looks like junk," Nobody wants a beat-up Telecaster with rust and scratches. But that's exactly why it's valuable. What? The man gestured toward the glass case. That $45,000 Strat you showed me? It's perfect, pristine, museum condition, but it has no soul. It sat in a case for 40 years being protected. He pointed to the dusty Telecaster. This guitar was lived, played in studios. Maybe on records you've heard 1,000 times. The scratches aren't damage. They're history. Norman stared at the guitar. I've been doing this 35 years. How did I miss this? Because you were looking for perfection, clean finishes, original parts, but the most valuable things usually look worthless. Norman looked up at the man. Who are you? The man put his sunglasses back on. Just someone who knows where to look. He started walking toward the door. Norman stood. Wait! At least, can I get your name? For when I authenticate this? For when I tell people about— The man stopped, turned. Prince. Norman's face went completely pale. Prince! You're Prince? Yeah. Norman couldn't speak. Prince walked to the door, then paused. One more thing. Anything. When you sell this, don't let it go to a collector who'll lock it away. Find someone who'll appreciate what it is, maybe even play it. That's what Leo Fender would have wanted. He left. The door chime rang. Norman stood alone in his shop, staring at a $50,000 guitar he'd been about to throw away. 2 weeks later, Norman contacted Fender's custom shop. They flew a senior historian to Los Angeles, Michael Stevens, 62, 30 years authenticating vintage Fenders. The authentication took 6 hours. Michael examined every detail, the serial number, the tool marks, the wood grain, the oxidation patterns. He used magnification tools, UV lights, chemical tests. At hour 5, he looked up at Norman. Where did you get this? Trade-in. Kid needed funeral money. I was going to sell it to a pawn shop. Michael's face went pale. Do you know what this is? Prince said it's a 1950 prototype. Prince? Prince Rogers Nelson? Yeah, he walked in 2 weeks ago. Picked it up from the corner. Told me it was worth $50,000. Michael set down his magnifying glass. Prince was being conservative. This is one of Leo Fender's personal test guitars. Serial number suggests it was used in the 1951 catalog photo shoot. That makes it museum grade. Verdict: real. One of 11 known 1950 Telecaster prototypes still in existence. Estimated value at auction, $65,000 to $85,000. Michael added, You were about to sell this to a pawn shop? Norman nodded, ashamed. Prince saved you from the biggest mistake of your career. July 2011. Christie's, New York. The guitar sold for $73,500. Norman's. Commission, $7,350. Norman used the money to hire a part-time authenticator. He started a new store policy. Every trade-in gets professionally examined. No exceptions. He gave an interview to Guitar Player magazine. What did Prince teach you? That I'd spent 35 years looking at guitars wrong. I was chasing perfection. But the most valuable instruments are the ones that have been used. The beat-up guitar in the corner might be worth 10 times the pristine one in the case. You just have to know how to look. Did you ever see Prince again? No, but I think about him every time someone walks in looking rough. Every time I'm tempted to judge a trade-in by its appearance. He taught me that expertise isn't about knowing prices. It's about knowing history. What's the most important lesson from that day? Norman thought for a long time. That the things we overlook are often the things we need most. I was so focused on the expensive guitars. the pristine ones in glass cases, that I almost threw away something priceless. Prince saw what I couldn't see, not because he was smarter, but because he was looking for different things. I was looking for perfection. He was looking for soul. April 21st, 2016. Prince died at Paisley Park. Norman closed his shop for the day. He put a sign in the window, "Closed in honor of the man who taught me to look in the corners." The sign stayed up for a week. Then Norman framed it, hung it behind his counter. It's still there today. 2024 Norman's Rare Guitars is still operational. Norman, now 71, still runs the shop. On the wall behind his desk, a framed photograph. Prince, sometime in 2011, walking down Sunset Boulevard. Norman found it online after Prince died. Next to it, the framed sign from 2016. And below both, a small plaque Norman made himself. April 16, 2011, Prince taught me that value isn't always visible. The dusty guitar in the corner changed my life, not because of what it sold for, but because of what it taught me. Look beyond perfection, look for history, look for soul. Norman Harris. Norman was interviewed again in 2023 for a documentary about Prince. Do you regret not recognizing him when he walked in? Every day, but also I'm grateful I didn't, because if I'd known it was Prince, I would have treated him like a celebrity, given him the VIP experience, shown him the expensive guitars. Instead, he was just another customer I underestimated, and that's exactly what I needed, to be humbled, to be taught. If he'd walked in as Prince the Legend, I would have learned nothing. But he walked in as a guy in a hoodie, and I learned everything. What would you say to him if you could? Norman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you for not destroying me when you could have. Thank you for teaching instead of lecturing. Thank you for seeing value in a guitar I was about to throw away. And thank you for reminding me that expertise without humility is just arrogance. You didn't just find a valuable guitar that day. You found a worthless dealer and made him better.